Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Mark Janish, founder of AccessMediaGlobal.com sports website. This is the flagship podcast program, the From the Bench podcast. I'm your host, of course, Mark Janish. This program is dated December 7th, 2018. Today, we're going to talk some NFL football. We're also going to talk some Division I college men's soccer and the College Cup happening out at UC Santa Barbara, just a few miles away from me down the 101 freeway to Ward Memorial Drive and exit Highway 217. All right. That will come up on the podcast. I will also be talking about some UC Santa Barbara basketball. UC Santa Barbara, of course, led by second-year coach Joe Pasternak, disciple of Sean Miller at Arizona. He's in his second year. His first year was 23-9 record and loss in the Big West basketball men's tournament to UC Irvine. He's actually started out 6-2. The Gauchos, unfortunately, though, their last game, they did not fare too well in Seattle at the University of Washington. University of Washington's crew, led by Coach Mike Hopkins, outlasted the Gauchos. The Gauchos, if they would have hit their free throws, probably would have made the game closer or perhaps won the game. They also committed 20-plus turnovers. And when you turn over the ball at that rate, you're going to generally lose games, as we know. Wanted to go ahead and just say hello to everyone listening on Stitcher Radio, on Libsyn, and Spotify. Those are the platforms with which you can listen to this podcast. My last podcast was regarding the James Paxton and New York Yankee trade by Seattle. Jerry Dipoto is continuing the fire sale. I can't even say it's a summer garage sale, folks, but he has chosen to gut the team. The team wins 89 games. They're competitive for about 3 months out of 6, and on the outside of the wild card race for the second half of the season. But I have to say, that podcast was right on the money, and that podcast was recorded prior to the trade of Robinson Cano to the New York Mets and his $120 million remaining on the contract that he signed 5 years ago, 10 years, $240 million. So the fire sale has begun in Seattle, and I gave you my fan perspective, having been in Seattle from 1992 to 2008. And I posed a question to Mariner fans regarding, are they willing to wait 2 more years and be patient with a much younger team, as this team was gutted by trader Jerry Dipoto. Jerry Dipoto, since September of 2015, since he became the general manager at that time, 79 transactions, trades, waiver wire, however they look at that. But, Trader Jerry, as I call him, going to be tough for Mariner fans. And my fandom extends to the Seattle Mariners, the Los Angeles Dodgers, the Seattle Seahawks, and the Rams, and the Dodgers, of course. But, a lot of those are my boyhood teams that I followed here in Southern California growing up. Right now, we're going to go ahead. We're going to get into the meat of this podcast right now. We're going to talk some NFL playoff seedings. If the playoffs started today, Patrick Mahomes, with his 40 touchdowns, leading the AFC in the number 1 slot. The number 2 slot occupied by Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. Out of the AFC, the number 2 slot, giving them first-round buys, of course. In the NFC, the aforementioned Los Angeles Rams. they just need to keep winning tonight. Sunday night's game over the NBC networks in the United States is going to be a very, very large game in determining the status of the Los Angeles Rams. Can they stop the defense of the Chicago Bears? Now, I think this game is going to be difficult for the Rams in one sense. The Rams can definitely be beat on the back end of their, I'm not going to say porous defense, but definitely middle of the road. You have Aqib Talib. I don't know if he's necessarily going to be active, but you do have Marcus Peters, who's a shadow of his former self in Kansas City. Definitely getting beat a lot if you've seen some of the nationally televised games of late, specific to the 43-40. I'm sorry, it was 51-47 game against Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. Then on the other side of that, you have the New Orleans Saints and Drew Brees. Drew Brees' team is second in the NFC as far as the number 2 slot. So Rams at number 1, Saints at number 2 in the NFC, Patriots at number 2, Kansas City at number 1. Right now, if the playoffs were to start today, the Baltimore Ravens, who are actually, they're getting Joe Flacco back. It was announced today. He did actually make practice, and he practiced fully apparently. But we will see whether the Ravens start a Lamar Jackson, the rookie. He's 3-0 as a starter in place of Joe Flacco. And I think Joe Flacco's days as Ravens starter are numbered. But you definitely want to go with the veteran as the playoffs approach. You also have the very, very hot Texans of Houston. 9-3 after an 0-3 start. They're a 3rd seed right now out of the AFC. The Los Angeles Chargers, who came back on the Pittsburgh Steelers last Sunday night. Great game. And, the Chargers have been injured. They've been missing guys, including Joey Bosa. Not that they're missing him now, but they've just had a lot of injuries at the wide receiver slot. The running back with Austin Eckler there, he's doing a very, very good job. And, of course, Phillip Rivers has better players around him. And then hopefully the Chargers will continue their winning ways. Anthony Lynn doing a great job. The only problem that I have with the Chargers is their lack of a kicking game. And God knows that Michael Badgley better get it together, because the Chargers, they've had some tough wins. They are going to be playing the Cincinnati Bengals. And boy, have the Cincinnati Bengals fallen on hard times. I think they started out like 4-0. They're now 5-7. And I have a question for the Queen City faithful in Cincinnati, Ohio. Are you willing to continue to support Marvin Lewis with your sports dollar? Marvin Lewis isn't an image. He's been with the franchise for like 16 years as head coach. Isn't it possibly time to look at the fact that you might want to advance further and not just be happy to qualify for the playoffs? You might want to advance in the playoffs. I don't think it's happening under Marvin Lewis. I'm not saying Marvin Lewis is going to be fired at the end of the season on Black Monday, the Monday after Week 17 in the NFL, but I definitely have some concerns, let's say, over the fate of the Cincinnati coach. Good luck in the Queen City. And then, of course, we have Ben Roethlisberger, Mike Tomlin, Antonio Brown, and the Steelers, who are 7-4-1. They're projected a 4th seed right now. The Chargers at 9-3 are 5th seed. Anthony Lynn just missed the playoffs after an 0-4 start last year. 9-7 last year. He's 9-3 now. And as I said earlier, they're going to be playing they will be playing the Cincinnati Bengals. Then on the other hand, we have out of the NFC North, the Vikings of Minnesota. Now, the Vikings of Minnesota, their problem, I believe, is not the stat padding of Kirk Cousins. He's done a good job. Their defense, however, has not and has slid into the middle of the pack in the NFL. They're 6-5-1. They're projected seed number 6. So that's a wild card slot. And then, of course, the Seattle Seahawks. I predicted them as 7-9. Wasn't sure about the back end of their defense, but they seem to have found a running game back in the days, as in the days of yore, when the Legion of Boom and Marshawn Lynch were toiling in Seattle. 7-5. The Vikings and Seahawks play at 5:15 p.m. Monday night in Seattle. Monday Night Football, nationally televised audience. We'll have to put the DVR on for that game, as I will not be available. Then, of course, we have the Bears, and we just wanted to add regarding the Bears. We all know about Khalil Mack and Raekwon Smith, great defensively. Mitchell Trubisky should be back. Not sure that Chase Daniels would be able to handle the Aaron Donalds of the world and the Rams defense with Andrew Whitworth and things of this nature. But we will see. The Mitchell Trubisky, he's actually improving. I know there's some skepticism in Chicago regarding his ability to lead the Bears to the Lombardi Trophy. But at the same time, we'll be looking at that on Sunday night, 5:20, the NBC network in the United States. Check your local cable and satellite listings if you get the game in your area. And then, of course, the 4th seed would be the Cowboys. Seahawks, 7-5, are in the 5th seed. Definitely a game we want to be watching this week. If you're an NFC East fan, would be Philadelphia and Dallas. I'll get to the over-unders in that game. A little later on in the podcast. Want to also look at who's in the hunt. The Titans, 30-9 winners yesterday, Thursday Night Football. Derrick Henry with a 99-yard run. Haven't seen a 99-yard run since I was a young teen. That would be Tony Dorsett. Tony Dorsett, I believe that was 1979, but check me on that. But I definitely do remember seeing that on Monday Night Football in the days of my youth. The Dolphins and the Colts are in the hunt. The Broncos are in the hunt with a very favorable schedule. The Bengals and the actual Browns are still mathematically alive. The Browns will be better soon. The Bills and the Jaguars and the Jets trail. But we definitely want to be looking at the Titans, the Dolphins, and I think Andrew Luck has had a great year. Would have to pull up his stats and give you those. Probably will do that my next podcast. But definitely the Titans, the Dolphins, and the Colts are in the hunt. In the NFC, the Carolina Panthers, the champion Eagles are still mathematically alive. The Redskins, however, a different story with Alex Smith. Alex Smith apparently does have an infection related to his leg injuries, which may mean he may not play again in the NFL. There's speculation about that. Of course, Tampa Bay and Dirk Cutter. Dirk Cutter and needs to decide who's going to quarterback the team. Will it be Brian Fitzpatrick or Jameis Winston? They're actually faltering at 5-7. And then, of course, we all know that the Green Bay Packers will be looking for a new coach at the end of the year. Mike McCarthy, former Dolphin coach Joe Philbin will be filling in, no pun intended, for Green Bay as they look to another coach to get some more productivity out of Aaron Rodgers. I think Green Bay has a very weak roster, to be honest with you. So we will see. But that is the playoff seedings and where things stand now. Once again, to go over them, the Chiefs and the Patriots, 1-2 in the AFC. The Rams and the Saints, 1-2 in the NFC. In the AFC, The Ravens, the Texans, the Chargers, and the Steelers would be in the playoffs at this time. The Vikings and the Seahawks, the Bears and the Cowboys would be in the wild card round in the NFC. So that takes care of my brief look at if the playoffs started today in the NFL, who would be where. Okay, we're going to go ahead and now we're going to move on to the picks. The picks for the week, week 14. I want to go ahead and just go over this for you. First game I'm looking at is the hapless New York Jets with returning Sam Darnold at Buffalo, 4-8. Western New York, we'll have to wait and see what Josh Allen does. We do actually see that this game has the Jets losing 6 in a row, but retaining Sam Darnold. He'll be back, and Josh Allen and Sam Darnold will meet. The over-under is 38.5, and the line is the Bills by 3.5. At this point, I think I go ahead and I take the points. I take Buffalo to win and the over at 38.5. The next game, I already mentioned Andrew Luck having a pretty solid return year. They'll be in Houston. Houston, 9 winners of 9 in a row. They're 9-3, of course, on Sunday. I have a line of the Texans the Texans by 4.5 is what the point spread is. The over-under is 49.5. I go ahead and I take the over in this game. I do think the Texans will ultimately win and to get their 10th straight win. But the Colts are going to put up some points, and I'm hoping that, if I'm a Colts fan, I'm hoping that the defense shows up and can stop Deshaun Watson. Moving on, Baltimore at Kansas City. The juggernaut that is Kansas City's offense led by Patrick Mahomes, Mr. All-Everything, Mr. MVP candidate, along with Drew Brees and so forth. Baltimore 7-5 at Kansas City 10-2. Arrowhead, a tough place to play. I have the Chiefs by the line is 6.5. The over-under is 51.5. I go ahead and take the over, and I do favor the Chiefs at home. I probably bump that up to a solid 7 right now. So I expect Kansas City to go 11-2, Baltimore to fall to 7-6, and then we will go ahead and see what Baltimore's number one defense can do. And the Kareem Huntless Chiefs now will have some problems. It's a tall order to shut down the high-octane offense or match it. So we will see what happens with Baltimore, the Baltimore number one ranked defense versus the high-flying Kansas City offense. Kansas City with the win. Take the points, move it up to about 7, and take the over in that game. New England, 9-3 at Miami. I have to say that the times that I've seen Miami doesn't have the knockout punch it needs, but they're always competitive. They're always in games, and the teams have split 4 of the last 5 seasons, all those with Dolphin wins coming at Miami. So even though the Patriots blew out the Dolphins earlier in the season, go with New England in this game. I would go ahead and take the Patriots. The line is 7.5. The over-under is 47. I go ahead and I take the under in this game. I don't know what position with either Brock Osweiler or Ryan Tannehill. I think Osweiler will be quarterbacking for Miami. Take New England in this game, nevertheless. Patriots by 7.5, and take the under at 47. Carolina and Cleveland. Interestingly enough, Cam Newton is underperforming for Carolina. They're 6-6 and on the outside looking in at a wild card playoff spot out of the NFC right now. They're at Cleveland Sunday 10 a.m. Pacific time. The line right now, I have Panthers by 11. Let's see. Panthers by 1.5. The over-under is 47. I'm going to go ahead and take the over, and I think that they have a solid roster as far as the Browns go. Baker Mayfield is very, very good. He just needs to continue to build consistency going into next year. The 4-7-1 Cleveland Browns and the Carolina Panthers. I'm going to go ahead and take this as a sleeper pick. I'm going to go ahead and take Cleveland right now. Panthers by 1.5. The over-under 47. Probably go ahead and take the over. Moving on to Atlanta at Green Bay. Mentioned Green Bay's problems in looking for a replacement for Mike McCarthy. The Packers by 5. The over-under is 50. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna take the Packers, but I'll take the under. Both teams are disappointing. The Packers are still at home. They have Aaron Rodgers, however, and they might get a burst in the wake of the McCarthy firing. Dome team in the cold. And that's going to be Atlanta's downfall. Of course, there's always a need for a running game in the cold weather, in my estimation. So we'll see what Atlanta can do as they attempt to win at Green Bay. 4-8 Atlanta, Green Bay, 4-7-1. Go ahead and take the Packers, but take the under. Packers are favored by 5 right now. New Orleans at Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay, up and down, little schizophrenic at quarterback. Don't know whether they want to start Winston or Fitzpatrick. Dirk Cutter may be on the hot seat in Tampa Bay, Florida. The Saints lost the opener to the Buccaneers 48-40, but they're a different team from what they were in week 1. New Orleans cannot afford to lose another game as they continue to seek the number 1 seed and home field advantage throughout the playoffs. We have the Saints by 8 and the over-under at 55.5. I go ahead and take the over, and I think the Saints are going to cover the spread. Once again, the Saints by 8. The Giants and Washington. This may be a clunker football game here. I've mentioned the loss of Alex Smith. Apparently, the Redskins signed Mr. Butt Fumble himself, Mark Sanchez, earlier in the week. The Giants are favored by 3.5. The over-under is 41. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take the under in this game. I don't think that the Giants' offense will be mustering much. And I do believe that the Redskin defense is going to show up. And I already mentioned just arrived Mark Sanchez down to the third quarterback in Washington due to the injuries to Alex Smith. Cincinnati in Los Angeles. Mentioned the Chargers. Last week's victory against Pittsburgh. 9-3 against Cincinnati. Cincinnati on the downhill side. We have the Chargers by 14. The over-under is 48. I go ahead and take the over, but I don't think the Chargers are going to beat Cincinnati by 14. I probably think it'll be somewhat less, maybe 10. 14 seems to be a lot. Go ahead and take the over and the Chargers in this game. The Bengals don't have Andy Dalton and A.J. Green. The Bengals are basically toothless. No emotional hangovers for the Chargers after their big victory. So we're going to move on to Denver and San Francisco. Based on their schedule, Denver, I think, has a real shot here at potentially qualifying for the playoffs. I know they have a legitimate defense. It's their offense in Case Keenum, which should be looked at very hard by Bronco fans as far as whether they're going to qualify for an AFC playoff berth. Browns favored by 4. I'm sorry, the Broncos favored by 4. The over-under is 45.5. I'm not sure about the starter for San Francisco. He's been a little bit up and down. Rookie out of Ole Miss. 45.5 is the over-under. This game is in San Francisco. I go ahead and I take the under, and I will see that Denver will probably get the victory over the hapless San Francisco 49ers. Detroit and Arizona. The line right now is Lions by 3. Over under 40.5. I probably go ahead and take the over in this game, and I predict the Lions will win. But you never know. Josh Rosen may rise up and have a great game, leading the Arizona Cardinals to the victory. The Arizona coming off, of course, a victory at Lambeau Field. They don't have a Kerryon Johnson in the backfield for Detroit. The Lions cannot exploit the run minus Kerryon Johnson. Now, this is a game that I was mentioning earlier in my open on the podcast here. Philadelphia and Dallas in my NFL segment. The Cowboys are favored by 3.5. The over-under is 44. You know what? This is one of those games where Philly is fighting for their playoff lives, but Dallas can solidify themselves, probably win the East with a victory. And we don't know which Philadelphia team is going to show up. The Cowboys are solid on the defensive side of the football, and they're a young team with confidence. It's just a question of whether they're going to be able to continue to run the ball with Ezekiel Elliott, and, of course, whether Amari Cooper and Dak Prescott, can continue to develop a prospered relationship on the field. So we will see. The Cowboys are favored by 3.5. The over-under is 44. I'm going to go ahead and take the over in this game. I do believe the Cowboys will win. As to whether I take the 3.5, I think 3.5 is being pretty generous for a home game. I think it's more of a toss-up. I think Carson Wentz has been throwing the ball pretty darn well recently. So we will see. Pittsburgh and hapless Oakland. The Oakland Alameda Coliseum. The Steelers are favored by 10.5. The over-under is 51.5 here. Steelers don't play well on the West Coast, and they're coming off an emotional loss, of course, to the aforementioned Chargers. They're better than the Raiders, even though Oakland is playing very, very hard. But, close only counts when you're talking about hand grenades and horseshoes on this December 7th, 2018. We remember the Greatest Generation and the attack on Pearl Harbor. Would be remiss if I did not mention the historical milestone today, thinking of all those in the United States military who protect our freedoms. And want to say that here at Access Media Global, we definitely appreciate it. The Rams in Chicago, this is the night game I mentioned on NBC, 5:15 p.m. Pacific time. The Rams are favored by 3. The over-under is 51.5. Weather could be a factor. And, of course, Chicago's defense is very, very scary with Khalil Mack, Raekwon Smith, and so on. The Rams are the NFL's best team at the moment and have no margin for error with home field advantage on the line as far as their mental checklist. So go ahead and take the Rams. And what I probably do is I take the under due to the cold weather. And then, of course, Minnesota at Seattle. This is going to be a fight for playoff lives. Seahawks favored by 3. The over-under is 45. Excuse me. The Vikings are in desperation mode, but can they stop that running game? The Seahawks, almost said the Rams. The Seahawks are very effective when they run the ball. Their desire is to run the ball 60% of the time or more. Seahawks will have a significant advantage at home, and we have the Seahawks by 3. The over-under is 45. Go ahead and take the over and the Seahawks only because it's a home game. But as I said, we have some serious weapons on Minnesota side. Adam Thielen, number 19, wearing number 19 for Minnesota. He's a weapon himself. Stephon Diggs and that crew as well. So we will see on Monday night what happens there. So that takes care of the over-under and my Week 14 picks. Wanted to go ahead and we're going to, let's see. Right, okay. We're going to go ahead and we're going to review the College Cup here in just a moment. You can definitely go ahead and call 805-893-UCSB. If you're in the Santa Barbara area, there's apparently still tickets available through the UCSBGauchos.com website and or calling 805-893-UCSB, the local mid-major UC Santa Barbara hosting its second College Cup. The first one was in 2010. The Akron Zips won their only title, their only NCAA title, 1-0 over the Louisville Cardinal back in 2010. UC Santa Barbara's first effort at hosting the College Cup. We're going to talk about the 18 College Cup here in just a couple moments. Want to let you know you're listening to Access Media Global's flagship podcast, the From the Bench podcast. AccessMediaGlobal.com is the website for all alternate sports. I'm the founder of the website and your host for the podcast. Once again, welcome to those of you listening on Stitcher Radio and Libsyn and Spotify. Okay, here we go. We're going to go ahead and look at the breakdown of the semifinals for tonight. Now, tonight's game is going to be on ESPNU at 5 o'clock here. So, 5 o'clock West Coast time, Santa Barbara, California. Going to go ahead and address the weather. Now, for those of you that have been in the Santa Barbara area, we've had a couple of days of rain off and on, very unsettled weather, but it does look very, very good for tonight's game. It's a beautiful day, very clear out. There are some clouds in the sky, but very, very beautiful day. So tonight, the weather forecast, which I did look up before I went to record this podcast here, we're looking at a low of about 48. Now, the first game begins at 5 p.m. Pacific time. Should be about 61 degrees, but I guess if I'm going out to Harder Stadium, which I am not, I will not be able to attend, unfortunately. You would want to probably bring either a light sweater or maybe you can get away with some gloves and a pretty sizable or hefty sweatshirt to keep you warm. The College Cup has arrived. Soccer heaven is what they call Harder Stadium on the campus of UC Santa Barbara. That, of course, is a nod to the 2006 champion UC Santa Barbara Gauchos who beat UCLA all those many years ago. So we're down to the Final Four. Michigan State, Akron, Maryland, and Indiana, 3 Big Ten teams as they vie for the Division I men's soccer national title beginning tonight. Michigan State will take on Akron, and then following that at 7:30, we will have Maryland and Indiana. The finals will be Sunday, and Sunday the 9th, and all 3 games will be on ESPNU. Check your local cable and satellite systems. Let's address the Michigan State Spartans, 14-4-4. They make their first Final Four. They're going to be playing the Akron Zips, who I've mentioned earlier. They're making their appearance, the first Final Four appearance since 1968, after defeating Illinois Chicago 2-0. Number 4, Louisville, actually, 2-1 in overtime. Number 13, Georgetown, 1-0. And James Madison University, 2-1. The Spartans will take on the Akron Zips, rated number 16. 16th rated Akron, 14-6-2. Winners of 8 in a row, including NCAA tournament wins over Rider, Syracuse, both by 3-1 scores. Number 1, Wake Forest, 1-0. And 3-time defending champion, the Stanford Cardinal, were beaten by Akron to bring the Zips to this position to perhaps claim their second College Cup Division I men's soccer title. The Akron Zips did play Michigan State earlier in the year. They beat Michigan State 2-1 in the only other matchup, but that matchup was at East Lansing. Of course, on the neutral pitch, we will see what Michigan State and Akron can do. 5 o'clock Pacific time starting on the pitch at Harder Stadium. Semifinal number 2, all Big Ten matchup, Maryland and Indiana, beginning at about 7:30 approximately Pacific time. The number 11 Maryland Terrapins, 11-6-4. We'll see a familiar foe from the Big Ten Conference, of course. Indiana, 22-1. They're going to meet for the third time on the season. The Hoosiers topped the Terrapins 2-1 in Bloomington in their first meeting, and the two teams battled to a 1-1 draw before Indiana advanced 4-3 on penalty kicks in a thrilling Big Ten Conference Tournament semifinal. Both teams have cruised against their competition in the NCAA tournament thus far. Indiana sailed past UConn 4-0. They beat number 20 Air Force 2-0, and number 13, the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame, were beaten by Maryland 1-0, and they also took care of NC State 2-0, and number 6 Duke 2-0, and they also beat the number 3 seed Kentucky Wildcats 1-0. So that takes care of the College Cup. Looking at that, I want to end the broadcast with more UCSB notes. The Gauchos will be playing Arkansas Pine Bluff at the Campus Event Center, 7 p.m. on Sunday. This is the first meeting of Arkansas Pine Bluff, and then, of course, a week from today, a week from Saturday, the Gauchos will be playing Rice University in Houston. So the 6-2 Gauchos will continue their road madness and their road non-conference schedule before they go to the Big West Conference league play out of the mid-major Big West Conference. Thank you for listening to this edition of the From the Bench podcast. I'm Mark Janish, and you have a great weekend. We'll be back soon with more sports news and views and opinions. Until next time, I'm Mark Janish. Thanks for listening to the From the Bench podcast. You can get me on Twitter, Mark at Access Media, 42 followers with a new account right now. So continue to join us there if you'd like. You can also go to accessmediaglobal.com. Latest posts include Richard Deitch podcast, the Sports Media podcast, the Sports Illustrated podcast with Jimmy Trena, UCSB basketball, UCSB soccer, and a few more things, including Seattle being approved as the 32nd, or with the 32nd franchise in NHL history. And they will start in 2021 as well. So a lot of NHL news, a lot of basketball and soccer news continuing on accessmediaglobal.com. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can click on the donate button and follow the steps to give. This is a totally non-corporately supported podcast, and these programs are produced with love and with a lot of care by myself at accessmediaglobal.com. Would love to have you continue to support Access Media Global. Thanks for listening, everyone, and you have a great weekend, and take care, everyone. Until next time, I'm Mark Janish, wishing you a superior and a very blessed weekend in sports. We'll be back next week with another podcast, follow up, all the breaking news, and so forth. Until next time, I'm Mark Janish saying so long for now.